King Kong didn't just climb the Empire State Building. He climbed directly into the nightmares of an entire generation. But the strangest parts of this iconic film happened far from the cameras, in a production filled with dangerous stunts, unpredictable mechanisms, malfunctioning props, and studio executives who pulled funding at the worst possible moments. Today, we're opening the vault on the 1933 masterpiece King Kong and revealing the extraordinary and sometimes perilous stories behind the movie that reshaped Hollywood forever. Fact number 1. Kong was only 18 inches tall. King Kong may have towered over New York City on screen, but in reality, the mighty monster was only an 18-inch puppet built with a steel armature, cotton padding, latex skin, and rabbit fur. Animator Willis O'Brien moved the puppet one tiny adjustment at a time, often spending hours on a few seconds of animation. The rabbit fur proved especially troublesome. Every time O'Brien touched the puppet, the fur shifted ever so slightly, creating the flickering, rippling effect you see in the final film. What should have been a technical flaw became one of Kong's defining traits, making him appear tense, alive, and constantly moving with emotion. Under hot studio lights and strict conditions, O'Brien and his team worked tirelessly to make this small creature feel enormous, giving him facial expressions, body language, and personality that were unheard of at the time. For a puppet barely taller than a ruler, Kong made a bigger impact on film history than any monster before him. Fact number 2, the director paid for the music out of his own pocket. When RKO panicked over the film's rising costs, they tried to cut the original score entirely, insisting stock music would be good enough. Director Merian C. Cooper knew that decision would cripple the film, so he personally paid composer Max Steiner $50,000, a massive sum during the Great Depression, to create a full orchestral soundtrack. Steiner responded with what became one of Hollywood's earliest and most influential symphonic scores, crafting musical themes that rose and fell with Kong's emotions. It was groundbreaking work, synchronized cues, character leitmotifs, and sweeping crescendos that turned the film from an adventure story into a tragic epic. Cooper's investment not only saved the movie's emotional core, it helped shape the future of movie music itself. Without that risk, King Kong would not feel nearly as powerful, and Steiner might never have become one of cinema's most celebrated composers. Fact number 3. Fay Wray sat in a tree for 22 hours straight. To capture Ann Darrow's terror during the Kong vs. T-Rex battle, Fay Wray endured a punishing 22-hour shoot perched inside a tall artificial tree under blazing studio lights. She spent the entire time reacting to projected stop-motion footage behind her, screaming, twisting, and clinging to branches while wind machines blasted her face and hair. Technicians constantly repositioned the tree, adjusted lighting, and brought in new camera angles, often leaving Wray suspended in uncomfortable poses for long stretches. By the end of the shoot, she was physically exhausted, her muscles aching from hours of tension and strain. Yet that fatigue produced some of the most convincing fear ever put on film. Her trembling hands, breathless gasps, and frantic expressions weren't acting. They were the result of one of the most demanding physical shoots an actress had ever faced at the time. Fact number 4. The giant hand almost killed Fay Wray. The scenes of Ann Darrow trapped in Kong's grasp were filmed with a full-size mechanical hand mounted to a crane, and it was far more dangerous than audiences realized. The pneumatic fingers were heavy and imprecise, loosening whenever Fay Wray struggled as the script required, causing her to slip dangerously between the massive wooden joints. At several points, she dangled high above the concrete floor with nothing supporting her but the unstable grip of the giant hand. Crew members shouted warnings mid-take when the fingers began to separate, but the cameras kept rolling because her real terror looked so compelling. Wray later admitted she genuinely feared falling, and that fear is unmistakable in her performance. The trembling voice, the panic in her eyes, the desperate thrashing, those were authentic reactions to a malfunctioning prop that came close to dropping her more than once. Fact number 5. Kong's roar was played backwards. Kong's roar is one of the most recognizable sounds in film history, but it was created with a surprisingly simple trick. Sound designer Murray Spivak recorded lions and tigers at the San Diego Zoo, then slowed the audio down and played it backward, producing a deep, unnatural bellow that felt both animalistic and otherworldly. To add texture, Spivak recorded himself growling into a megaphone and blended those layers at different speeds. The result was a roar unlike anything audiences had ever heard, a sound that suggested immense size and raw power without relying on any artificial synthesizers or early sound machines. Spivak's technique became a blueprint for creating monster voices for decades, proving that imagination and experimentation could produce something far more memorable than technology alone. It remains one of the most innovative sound designs of the early talking picture era. Fact number 6, the head was covered in 40 bearskins. For the film's dramatic close-up shots, the effects team constructed a massive mechanical version of Kong's head and shoulders, and it was every bit as complicated as it sounds. They covered the structure with 40 real bearskins, each sewn together to create a thick, layered texture that would look natural under intense studio lights. Inside the giant head, a team of operators worked in unison to control the eyes, mouth, brows, and nostrils through a network of levers, cables, and motors. The machinery grew hot quickly, forcing the operators to take frequent breaks as sweat poured down their arms and faces. Yet the head's range of motion was remarkable for its time, allowing Kong to grimace, glare, and snarl with surprising nuance. Every expression you see, those flickering eyes, that tense jawline, those dramatic snarls, was created by multiple exhausted technicians working with perfect timing inside a metal furnace disguised as a monster. Their effort gave Kong a face that felt capable of rage, confusion, and even heartbreak. Fact number 7, Edgar Wallace died after 2 weeks. When author Edgar Wallace was hired to write the screenplay, RKO expected him to bring his signature flair for adventure and suspense to the project. But Wallace had barely begun working, turning in only a rough outline, when he tragically died of pneumonia in early 1932, just weeks into development. His early drafts bore almost no resemblance to the final story, which was rewritten extensively by Merian C. Cooper and screenwriter Ruth Rose. But Cooper had personally promised Wallace he would receive credit, and he honored that promise even after Wallace's passing. The studio, recognizing Wallace's name would boost publicity, embraced the credit as well. Despite contributing very little to the finished script, his association helped sell the idea of King Kong as a gripping, high-stakes adventure. Ironically, Wallace's name became tied to one of cinema's most iconic films, even though he never lived to see any part of it come to life. Fact number 8, a flower bloomed during filming. Stop-motion animation demands absolute consistency. Any shift in the environment can ruin hours or even an entire day of painstaking work. That's exactly what happened when the effects team was animating a jungle sequence and discovered a subtle but disastrous problem. A real flower placed on the miniature set had bloomed during the shoot. When played back at full speed, the petals appeared to burst open within seconds, turning what should have been a seamless scene into an accidental time lapse. No one noticed the change until the footage was reviewed, and by then, it was too late. The entire day of animation had to be thrown out. In those moments, the animators were reminded just how delicate their sets were. Even the slightest bit of real-world biology ignored for a few hours could disrupt the illusion and force them to start over. It was a small mistake with a big impact, emphasizing how unforgiving stop motion can be. Fact number 9, the wall was recycled from a biblical epic. The enormous wall separating the Skull Island villagers from Kong wasn't built specifically for the film. It was actually a recycled set from Cecil B. DeMille's 1927 biblical epic King of Kings. RKO repurposed the structure, carving new doors, adding torches, and reshaping the facade to resemble an ancient jungle fortress. The wall was so massive that it stretched across an entire section of the backlot, and it took crews days to modify it for Kong's destructive entrance. During filming, the set became one of the most versatile structures on the lot, used in multiple productions both before and after King Kong. but none of those appearances would match the impact of the moment Kong smashes through it, roaring as villagers scatter around him. A piece of silent-era architecture ended up becoming one of the most legendary set pieces in monster movie history. Fact number 10. The dinosaurs were from a canceled film. Before King Kong ever went into production, animator Willis O'Brien had spent years working on another stop-motion creature project called Creation. The studio ultimately canceled the film after producing only a few test scenes, but O'Brien refused to let his work go to waste. Many of the dinosaur armatures, designs, and even bits of animation practice he created for Creation were repurposed directly into King Kong. This included the T-Rex, the Brontosaurus, and several smaller creatures that populate Skull Island. The reuse not only saved the studio tens of thousands of dollars, but also allowed O'Brien to expand on ideas he had spent years refining. In a twist of fate, the dinosaurs that lost their original movie ended up starring in one of the most influential creature features ever made, solidifying their place in cinematic legend alongside Kong himself. Fact number 11. Kong's chest beat sounds were from someone getting hit. The thunderous sound of Kong pounding his chest wasn't created with drums, mallets, or early sound machines. It came from a much more unusual source. Sound designer Murray Spivak discovered that hitting a human chest produced a deeper, more resonant tone than any drum he tested. So he had his assistant stand with his back toward a microphone while Spivak struck his chest with a padded drumstick, capturing each hollow thump through the assistant's ribcage. The microphone picked up the vibration in a way that made the impact sound massive, giving Kong the booming authority of a creature weighing several tons. Spivak then layered the recording with slowed-down gorilla grunts to add texture and realism. It was a simple, low-tech solution, but it worked better than anything the studio had access to at the time. The result was iconic, a chest-beating sound so convincing that audiences assumed it came from an enormous mechanical rig, never realizing it was just one very dedicated sound assistant, standing still and getting hit repeatedly in the name of movie magic. Fact number 12. The spider pit scene made people walk out. One of the most infamous deleted scenes in Hollywood history is the legendary spider pit sequence, where surviving sailors fall into a ravine and are attacked by giant spiders, crabs, and other monstrous insects. According to accounts from early test screenings, the scene was so disturbing and so graphically unsettling for 1933 audiences that it broke the rhythm of the story. Viewers reportedly recoiled, looked away, and in some cases, even walked out of the theater. Director Merian C. decided it wasn't worth keeping, not because it lacked quality, but because it overwhelmed the emotional tone of the film and pulled attention away from Kong's storyline. He ordered the scene removed immediately, and the footage was eventually destroyed to save storage space. All that remains today are a few anecdotal descriptions, production sketches, and later fan attempts to recreate it. The original footage has never been found, making the spider pit sequence one of cinema's greatest lost treasures and one of its earliest examples of a scene deemed too disturbing for mainstream audiences. Fact number 13. The film went wildly over budget. King Kong began as a modest adventure film, but as the project grew, so did the expenses. The elaborate stop-motion sequences, mechanical props, oversized sets, and experimental sound techniques pushed RKO far beyond their comfort zone. At one point, studio executives threatened to halt production entirely, convinced the film would never earn back its mounting costs. To change their minds, Merian C. assembled a test reel showing Fay Wray screaming at blurred monster footage, a simple demonstration of what the full film could achieve. Impressed by the energy and ambition of the test, executives reluctantly approved additional funding. In the end, the movie exceeded its original budget by roughly $300,000, a staggering figure for the Depression era. But when Kong debuted, it became a runaway financial success and one of RKO's biggest hits, proving that Cooper's belief in the project was well worth the risk. The budget may have terrified the studio, but the payoff changed movie history. Fact number 14. Fay Wray recorded all her screams in one session. Fay Wray, often called Hollywood's original Scream Queen, recorded all of Ann Darrow's blood-curdling screams in a single, intense studio session. She spent hours projecting terror at the microphone, modulating her voice to match every stage of fear the character experiences, from startled shrieks to desperate, full-throated cries. Wray later joked that the session felt like a twisted opera performance, which she lovingly nicknamed her aria of the agonies. Her vocal stamina astonished the sound engineers, who were used to actors wearing out after only a few takes. The captured audio became essential to Kong's emotional impact, giving weight to scenes where the stop-motion monster interacts with a flesh and blood human. Those iconic screams cemented Wray's place in horror history, and they remain some of the most recognizable vocal moments ever put on film. Fact number 15. Bruce Cabot was discovered as a doorman. Before being cast as Jack Driscoll, Bruce Cabot was hardly a Hollywood leading man. He was working as a manager and occasional doorman at the Embassy Roof Club in Los Angeles. Producer David O. Selznick happened to notice him one evening and was struck by his rugged appearance and quiet confidence. Cabot had done a few minor roles, but nothing close to the scale of King Kong. When he auditioned, his natural intensity and no-nonsense demeanor convinced the filmmakers he could hold his own next to both Fay Wray and an 18-inch stop-motion monster. The role launched Cabot into a long career in film, ultimately leading to collaborations with major stars, including John Wayne. For an actor plucked almost off the street, stepping into King Kong wasn't just a lucky break, it was the beginning of a Hollywood legacy. Fact number 16. The jungle was shared with another movie. The thick, humid jungle of Skull Island, those tangled vines, giant trees, and shadowy pathways, wasn't built exclusively for King Kong. It was the exact same set being used at the very same time for the RKO thriller The Most Dangerous Game, which also starred Fay Wray and Robert Armstrong. Both productions shared the same soundstage, the same foliage, and sometimes even the same props, with crews moving hurriedly back and forth as the two films alternated shooting schedules. In some cases, scenes for King Kong were filmed just minutes after sequences for The Most Dangerous Game were completed, with assistants rushing in to reset lighting, reposition plants, and sweep away footprints in the miniature mud. The overlap was intense. The actors would sprint between sets, occasionally filming scenes for one movie while still wearing makeup for the other. This unusual production dance was purely a cost-saving measure during the Great Depression, but it ended up creating two iconic films that used the same jungle to terrify audiences in completely different ways. What started as a budget constraint became one of the busiest and most creatively productive sound stages in Hollywood history. Fact number 17. The Empire State Building was only 2 years old. When King Kong was made, the Empire State Building was still brand new. So new, in fact, that many Americans had never seen it in person when the film premiered in 1933. It had opened only 2 years earlier and stood as the tallest building in the world, a gleaming symbol of human ambition during one of the darkest economic periods in U.S. history. Merian C. selected it for the finale because nothing else matched the sense of scale he wanted. The building represented the very peak of human engineering, making it the perfect place for a giant beast to make his final stand. The idea of Kong climbing it wasn't just visually astonishing, it was culturally resonant. Audiences were still captivated by the skyscraper's futuristic silhouette, and seeing a massive creature clinging to its spire sent a shock through viewers who had never witnessed anything like it. That unforgettable image helped cement both Kong's mythology and the Empire State Building's status as an American landmark, linking the two together in popular imagination forever. Fact number 18. Kong's footsteps were made with plungers. To create the heavy, earth-shaking thud of Kong's footsteps, sound designer Murray Spivak didn't rely on drums or studio machinery. He used plungers. He attached them to his feet, walked across a box filled with gravel, and recorded the dull, resonant impacts as the plungers struck the mixture of stones and dirt. To soften the tones and deepen the resonance, Spivak wrapped the plungers in foam, adjusting them until they produced the perfect booming sound that suggested immense weight. Layering in subtle low-frequency rumbles, he transformed those simple recordings into something that felt like the footsteps of a creature weighing thousands of pounds. It was an ingenious, low-tech technique that delivered a convincing illusion long before subwoofers or digital manipulation existed. Spivak's creativity on this film shows how the limitations of early sound technology often led to solutions more imaginative than anything a modern studio might attempt. Fact number 19. The original Kong model sold for over $200,000. One of the original stop-motion Kong armatures used in the film survived the decades despite its fragile construction. Over time, its cotton padding, latex skin, and rabbit fur decayed, leaving behind only the delicate metal skeleton that had once created Kong's lifelike movements. When the model went to auction in 2009, collectors flocked to bid on a rare piece of special effects history, and it ultimately sold for an astonishing $203,000. For many, the armature wasn't just a prop, it was a symbol of the birth of modern visual effects, a physical reminder of the artistry and labor that went into creating the world's most famous movie monster. Despite its weathered condition, it stands as one of the most treasured artifacts from early Hollywood, proving just how deeply King Kong continues to resonate with generations of filmmakers, fans, and collectors. Fact number 20. Animation alone took over a year to complete. The breathtaking stop-motion animation sequences in King Kong weren't just innovative, they were incredibly time-intensive, requiring more than an entire year of dedicated work. The animation team often produced only a few seconds of footage per day, painstakingly adjusting models, repositioning lights, and tracking continuity with extraordinary precision. The Kong vs. T-Rex fight alone demanded 7 full weeks, with animator Willis O'Brien and his assistants working frame by frame to ensure every movement, bite, and tumble felt dynamic and believable. Because lighting changes would ruin the illusion, the team wasn't allowed to open studio doors during the day, forcing them to work in sweltering, sealed environments to preserve consistency. Many animators slept on site, lived on coffee, and worked through the night to maintain momentum. Their devotion resulted in effects so groundbreaking that generations of filmmakers, from Ray Harryhausen to Peter Jackson, cite them as formative influences. The sheer amount of labor behind those few minutes of screen time helped define what cinematic special effects could achieve, setting the foundation for nearly a century of movie magic. And there you have it, 20 shocking facts about the 1933 classic King Kong. If you love discovering the secrets behind this legendary film, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which fact surprised you most. Thanks for watching.